On Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A federal judge in Washington has dismissed all charges against the 5 Blackwater operatives accused of gunning down 14 innocent Iraqis in Baghdad's Nissour Square in September of 2007. Judge Ricardo Urbina's dismissal of the charges on New Year's Eve was met with outrage in Iraq. The Iraqi Prime Minister's spokesman, Ali al-Dabah, vowed to pursue the case and called Judge Urbina's dismissal, quote, unfair and unacceptable.
We are sorry that the federal judge had that verdict. We keep them and we hold them criminals. As per our investigation here in Baghdad, the Blackwater personnel, those 5 people, they had used excessive force and they didn't follow the rule of engagement, and they had killed innocent Iraqi. We reserve the right of our victims, Iraqis, and all the citizens which has been harmed during this criminal act. We reserve the right to follow and to bring them to the justice.
Al-Dabah also indicated that the Iraqi government would support a lawsuit filed in U.S. courts by victims of the shooting against the 5 security guards from Blackwater, now known as Z Services, that's XE. Last Thursday, Judge Urbina dismissed the charges against the 5 Blackwater guards, saying U.S. Justice Department prosecutors had built their case on sworn statements that the guards had given under a promise of immunity. He said the government's explanations were, quote, contradictory, unbelievable, and lacking in credibility. Defense lawyers called the decision, quote, tremendously gratifying, and said it invigorated their belief in the American court system. Meanwhile, General Ray Odierno, the American commander in Iraq, said he understood that people would be upset by the decision, but added, quote, the bottom line is, using the rule of law, the evidence obviously was not there or was collected illegally. Well, for more on this, I'm joined here in New York by attorney Scott Horton. He is a contributor to Harper's Magazine, an international law expert. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Good to be with you,
Were you
Amy.
surprised, Scott?
Well, we knew this was going to be an issue. I think it was surprising that we got a decision before any evidence was ever taken and it went to trial. And in fact, you know, I think the vehemence of Judge Urbina's decision is also something of a surprise.
Well, explain exactly what it was he decided and what it was he was objecting to.
Well, first of all, I should note that General Odierno's statement is completely incorrect. That is, the decision to dismiss these charges had nothing to do with lack of evidence or weak evidence against the Blackwater employees. To the contrary, there was copious evidence. There was plenty of evidence prosecutors could have used that they evidently weren't prepared to, including eyewitnesses there. The decision to dismiss was taken as a punishment measure against Justice Department prosecutors based on the judge's conclusion that they engaged in grossly unethical and improper behavior in putting the case together. And specifically what they did is they took statements that were taken by the Department of State against a grant of immunity. That is, the government investigators told the guards, give us your statement, be candid, be complete, and we promise you we won't use your statement for any criminal charges against you. But the Justice Department prosecutors took those statements and in fact used them. They used them before the grand jury. They used them to build their entire case. And they did this notwithstanding warnings from senior lawyers in the Justice Department that this was improper and could lead to dismissal of the case. It almost looks like the Justice Department prosecutors here wanted to sabotage their own case. It was so outrageous.
Do you think that's possible?
I think it is possible. Specifically, in this case, there were briefings that occurred on Capitol Hill early on in which senior officials of the Justice Department told congressional investigators, staffers, and congressmen that essentially they didn't want to bring the case. In fact, one of the congressmen who was present at these briefings told me they were behaving like defense lawyers putting together a case to defend the Blackwater employees, not to prosecute them. And I think we see the evidence of that copiously in Judge Urbina's opinion.
I want to play a clip of Dr. Jawad, who lost both his wife, Mohassin, and his son, Ahmed, in the Blackwater shootings on September 16, 2007. In this excerpt, we hear Dr. Jawad describing how he came to learn of what had happened to his family. He'd been waiting that day for his wife and son to pick him up from work. He was a doctor. When he returned home alone that afternoon, he was worried not to find them there. He called his brother, who went to the morgue after failing to find them at the emergency room and operating theater of a local hospital. Dr. Jawad is being translated from Arabic.
He went to the morgue.
فكان الشخص المسؤول على المورج أخبرهم بأنه استلموا 16 جثة من الحادث.
The person who was responsible for the morgue told them that they had received 16 bodies as casualties from the incident of that day.
كلها كانت معروفة الهوية.
They were all identifiable.
ما عدا اثنين.
Except for two.
جثتين محروقة ومشوهة.
2 bodies completely burnt.
And disfigured. كانوا حاطيها في أكياس نايلون سوداء.
They were put in black plastic bags.
أخي كان الصبح في المستشفى لما صار الحادث. سمع الأصوات المعركة كانت معركة عنيفة وكانت طيارات الهليكوبتر يعني تدور حول المنطقة وترمي من الهليكوبترات.
My brother on that day in the morning he was in the hospital and he heard the shots and he heard the helicopters and shooting from helicopters. It was a battle, a fight.
يقول لكن ما كان يعني أتصور أن يكون يعني ابن أخوي أو زوجتي هم اللي مقتولون في هذا الحادث.
And of course it didn't occur to him that my wife and my son were
the victims
among the victims of the incident.
My wife, what remained from his head is only the jaws and part of the neck. But I identified her from the dental bridge. Has got a dental bridge. And my son, what remained from his clothes was only part of the shoes and socks.
Dr. Jawad talking about what happened to his wife and his son as they were gunned down in Nissour Square by the Blackwater operatives. Now the case against them has been dismissed. Scott Horton, can another case be brought against them?
Absolutely. In fact, this decision puts the U.S. in breach of its treaty obligations to prosecute this case, which was an absolute international law obligation. Now, this case was being prosecuted in U.S. court because of an order that was issued by the U.S. occupation authorities that granted these people immunity from Iraqi criminal prosecution and accountability. And I think the rule of international law is quite well settled that if the U.S. cannot, for technical reasons, that's this ruling here, it is purely technical, it has nothing to do with the merits of the case. If the U.S. cannot, for technical reasons, prosecute the case, the U.S. is really obligated to waive the immunity under that order and surrender these individuals to the Iraqi authorities for prosecution, probably with an agreement as to what charges would be brought and an agreement that any prison term they were sentenced to could be served in the United States. In addition to that, there's also the possibility that was alluded to in the setup here for a civil action, and civil claims on behalf of the families of the victims are already pending in U.S. courts, and the Iraqi government has now announced it's going to directly support those claims.
What about the civil lawsuit that's been brought against the Blackwater Guards?
Well, that will be for damages, and the evidence of their culpability is quite overwhelming. You know, one of the surprising things about this case before Judge Urbina is that the prosecutors were developing their entire case based on the statements that had been issued by the guards. Well, they didn't need to do that. There were dozens of eyewitnesses in Iraq who were only too happy to come forward and testify about what happened and what was seen, and there was an incredible amount of forensic evidence of what occurred that day. So there's plenty of evidence to be used. Plus, of course, in the civil suit, the standard for liability is a lower standard. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's rather by preponderance of the evidence.